Hey guys, tonight we're headed back to the clinking tankards, smoky hearths, and sticky tavern floors of medieval Europe, where getting absolutely sloshed wasn't just a weekend activity. It was basically a survival strategy. Picture this: it's dawn, and you're already sipping ale. Not because you're rebellious, or throwing a bottomless brunch, but because your other option is water straight from a stream where someone just washed their armpits. Yum, you're small, just a kid, maybe 7 or 8, and you're handed your morning drink. It's called small ale, which sounds adorable, but it's basically beer diluted enough that you won't fall into the pig trough after one sip. Still, it's alcoholic. And yes, you're drinking it before you learn to read, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop your location and local time in the comments. Are you sipping tea or eyeing your own stash of medieval mead? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your day begins not with a glass of milk or juice, but with ale poured into a rough wooden cup. It's warm, flat, and smells vaguely like bread gone rogue. No one thinks this is weird. In fact, it's the most normal part of your breakfast. You tear into yesterday's rye bread and wash it down with something brewed in a cauldron behind your house. Water? Not a chance. Even if you're lucky enough to have a well, there's no filtration system. No boiling. No chlorine. Just mud, bacteria, and hope. And hope does not pair well with porridge, so, you drink ale. Always ale. Sometimes wine if you're rich, or cider if you're rural and surrounded by orchards. But even kids have their share. This wasn't a drunken free-for-all, it was sustenance. Beer and ale were calories, hydration, and a morale booster all in one. Historians still argue whether this near-constant consumption made people buzz 24/7, or if their bodies just adjusted to it. Either way, everyone was tipsy enough to be cheerful and just sober enough to chase chickens when needed. You're probably imagining foamy golden liquid served in a frosty glass, right? Sorry. Medieval booze was rustic. Thick, cloudy, sometimes with floaters. Like drinking oatmeal that's trying to party. Still, it was better than dysentery. Your mother brews it in the kitchen, because yes, brewing is women's work for now. She stirs malted barley in warm water with a stick older than your grandfather, then throws in wild herbs and lets it sit for days. You know it's ready when the yeast farts stop and the scum settles. And congratulations, it's beer. At the Manor down the lane, even the lord and lady drink with breakfast. Theirs is stronger, darker, sometimes spiced. And they don't brew it themselves, some kitchen boy or alewife does that for them. But the ritual is the same: you drink to start the day, drink with lunch, drink in the afternoon to stay awake, drink in the evening to fall asleep. You are one medieval fermentation cycle in human form, and yet, it isn't about getting drunk. Not really. Not at first. Still, the effects creep in. Around mid-afternoon, your steps feel bouncier. Someone makes a joke about the blacksmith's beard and it's the funniest thing you've ever heard. You giggle until you snort. Then chase a chicken for reasons even you don't understand. The elders say ale makes you strong. It keeps your blood warm, your humors balanced, and your belly full. It even helps digestion, though that's debatable. You just know you like the fizzy feeling in your limbs. Your dad swears he works harder after a drink. He forgets he also fell asleep standing up last week. But no one blames him. It's expected. Drunkenness isn't shameful, unless it gets in the way of your duties. A tipsy shepherd might lose a sheep or two, and that's fine. A drunk blacksmith, though, that gets dicey. Your village once watched as one very inebriated smith accidentally welded his boot to the anvil. He had to walk around with a chunk of iron for a week. Now he brews his own beer weaker. By sunset, you're back home. Dinner is stew and more ale. You sit by the fire and listen to stories about the time your uncle drank a gallon of cider and tried to bless a donkey. He still insists it said amen. You drift to sleep feeling fuzzy and full, with a mild buzz still humming through your bones. It's not a party. It's just life, but of course, the story of medieval intoxication isn't all quaint countryside charm. Even in these early days, alcohol is entwined with your fate in strange, unpredictable ways. A local herbalist once gave your neighbor a drink to help with his melancholy. He was sad after losing 2 goats and a bet, and she promised him something strong. Whatever it was had honey, herbs, and probably a pinch of magic. He claimed it made the moon talk. His wife claimed it made him snore louder than the pigs. Historians still argue whether these concoctions count as medicine or recreational madness. The line was always blurry. Sometimes, the ale turns sour. Literally. If the yeast doesn't take or the mash is too old, the brew becomes a vinegary mess. And yet, waste not, want not, you drink it anyway. The phrase acquired taste gets a medieval origin story. You learn to sniff a mug before you sip. Not to check the bouquet like a wine snob, but to make sure it won't kill you. No pressure. Still, you grow up into this world where intoxication is woven into the fabric of your day. No one teaches you to drink responsibly, they just expect you to know when to stop falling over. By the time you're a teenager, your tolerance is legendary. You can outdrink the baker's son and recite all of the Song of Roland while doing it. Your parents beam with pride. They don't know you blacked out halfway through and replaced half the lyrics with chicken noises. There are whispers, though. Warnings. About how too much ale makes you see demons or confess secrets. A traveling friar once told a story about a man who drank so much he tried to marry a tree. He said the man was cursed. You suspect he just tripped and fell in love with bark. Still, the caution sticks. Drinking is everyday life, but not without consequence. One winter evening, your uncle drinks too fast and forgets to bring the cows in. A blizzard hits. They're found 2 days later in someone else's field, surrounded by hoofprints and empty mugs. The local priest declares it a miracle. You suspect it was just a very determined cow with a taste for ale, because yes, even animals drink. Fermented apples, spilled beer, leaky barrels. If it sits out long enough, something with hooves or feathers is going to get tipsy. There's a village legend about a goose that got into the mead and sang better than the choir. You wish it were true, so here you are, a young, semi-permanently tipsy medieval human, living in a world where drinking isn't rebellion, it's routine. Where ale is food, wine is medicine, and sobriety is kind of suspicious. Your story is just beginning. The taverns await. The weddings, the feasts, the brawls, the blurry nights and hazy mornings. But for now, you stretch out by the fire, ale in hand, head pleasantly spinning, and think, this is fine. The tavern is already half full when you push open the crooked wooden door. Warm air rushes out, thick with smoke, sweat, and something vaguely resembling old cheese. A fire crackles near the hearth, and mugs clink in a rhythm that feels older than the building itself. You step inside and become part of the hum. You're here because it's the evening, and that means ale. Not just because you're thirsty, but because this is the medieval equivalent of social media, the break room, and your favorite neighborhood drama channel all in one. The tavern is where everything happens, and you're about to drink your way through it. You make your way toward the bench near the wall, ducking under a ceiling beam low enough to decapitate taller men. Everyone looks up, briefly, as you pass. A few nods, one grumble, and a burp that sounds almost like your name. You nod back. You're part of the landscape here now. A tired-looking tavern keeper gestures at you with a pitcher. You nod, and moments later a roughly hewn wooden mug is slammed down in front of you. It sloshes. You wipe the rim with your sleeve and take a sip. It's bitter. Warm. A bit gritty. There might be something floating in it, a chunk of barley or a bit of the ceiling. You don't ask. You just drink. This is peasant drinking at its finest. You're not sipping goblets of golden wine in a courtly hall, you're in the noisy belly of the village, sharing space and smells with shepherds, millers, and pig farmers. Here, you drink cheap ale by the pint, not by the polite half-cup. And it's always communal. No one has their own personal tankard. You pass mugs around like bread, hoping no one's sick. The benches are uneven and sticky with generations of spilled drink. The floor is packed dirt, darkened from centuries of feet and slop. Chickens sometimes wander through. One just pecked your foot. You don't blame it. Your boot probably smells like bread and old cheese. As the evening thickens, voices rise. The old shepherd near the fire starts telling stories. Again. Something about the time he saw a ghost during a thunderstorm, or maybe it was just his wife, angry and backlit. You smile into your ale. The tavern is a strange mix of relaxation and danger. People are here to unwind, yes, but one wrong look, one misheard insult, and a mug could go flying. You've seen it before. That scar on the baker's ear. Tankard. The limp the cooper walks with. Ale spill, followed by angry mule. Still, this is where people bond. You hear laughter over in the corner, where two men are arm wrestling with their elbows planted in puddles of something suspiciously sticky. Someone else is teaching a child to sing a lewd song, and no one stops him. It's just life. The local brewer, Marjorie, shows up after dark. She's in her 50s, built like a barrel herself, and knows everyone's name and secrets. She brews the best ale in town, mostly because she uses honey and never waters it down. Also because she's terrifying, she thumps down a jug of her latest batch and glares at anyone who doesn't immediately compliment it. You do. It's actually good, though a bit stronger than expected. By your third sip, the room is starting to spin in slow, lazy circles. Marjorie grins. You overhear gossip at the next table. The tanner's son might have gotten someone pregnant. Or maybe he just owes the baker money. Either way, he's not here tonight, which means everyone's free to speculate in peace. Someone swears he saw him sneaking into the woods with a jug and a lute. No one questions this. Lutes make people do weird things. Another man chimes in, something about how the last batch of ale tasted like mushrooms. No one knows if that's good or bad. Someone suggests it was actual mushrooms. Someone else suggests the mushrooms might have been magic. A third person, clearly halfway to unconsciousness, just repeats the word mushroom and giggles. Historians still argue whether the average peasant drank more than modern people. On paper, yes. In practice, well, it was different. You weren't drinking to escape work. You were drinking while working, after working, and because working in a field all day makes you want something that tastes like celebration, you nurse your mug while watching the firelight dance on the blackened beams above. Someone's carved their initials into the wood with a dull knife. You wonder how many people have sat here over the decades, how many quiet moments, drunken toasts, whispered secrets have soaked into the bones of this old room. Another round appears. You don't remember ordering it, but here it is. You drink it anyway. A wandering musician enters, holding a battered fiddle and looking like he lost a duel with a bush. He plays something fast and joyful, and suddenly people are stomping their feet. Not quite dancing, just stomping. Rhythmically. Loudly. Like trying to summon a rain god, it works. Someone spills an entire jug of ale down their own leg. They don't even notice. The tavern keeper's wife yells from the back about the noise. No one listens. She's used to it. She still brings out stew later. It tastes mostly of turnips, but there's a comforting warmth in the bowl. You dunk your bread in it and let the broth soak up the lingering bitterness of your drink. By now, the fire's burned low. Smoke clings to your clothes. Your voice is hoarse from shouting over the din. Your mind is swimming in the soft, fuzzy glow that comes only from the right combination of exhaustion, alcohol, and the knowledge that you don't have to wake up early tomorrow. A man near you starts to sing. Loud, off-key, but with enthusiasm. Everyone else joins in by the second verse, despite no one knowing all the words. You mumble along. Something about a goose, a ladder, and a miller's daughter. It doesn't need to make sense. It just needs to rhyme. As the song ends, a quiet settles. Some folk stumble out into the cool night air, headed home with lanterns bobbing like fireflies. Others doze right here on the benches, arms folded, heads lolling. You decide to stay just a little longer, watching the firelight flicker on the mugs lined up behind the bar. A few folks are arguing softly now about saints. One swears Saint Bridget turned water into beer, twice. Another insists Saint Arnold told people to drink beer instead of water to avoid the plague. This part is actually true. Kind of. You sip slowly, wondering which saint would protect you from hangovers, then someone brings out the dice, and now it's a gambling night. You wake up groggy, eyes stuck together with sleep and something you hope isn't stew from last night. Your mouth tastes like smoke and barley. Outside your window, a rooster is already screaming at the world, and a goat stares at you with unnerving judgment. You roll over, no such luck, the day is calling, and so is your lord. Which is to say, there's muck to be shoveled, firewood to split, and something to do with a fence that needs fixing, again. You swing your legs off the cot and reach for the mug you left beside your bed last night, warm. Flat. Slightly fuzzy around the rim. You drink it anyway, because in this world, drinking isn't just for peasants in taverns. Oh no. Nobles get in on the action too, often harder, louder, and with significantly more embroidery involved. And tonight, you're heading up to the manor house. You've been asked, read, commanded, to help with the feast preparations. Which means you're about to witness a whole different kind of getting wasted. You trudge up the muddy path, the manor house looming in the distance like a smug loaf of stone. Inside, the air is thick with the smells of roasting meat, wet dog, and a suspiciously strong perfume that makes your nose twitch. The Lord is hosting guests, and the wine is flowing. You are handed a tray. You do not drop it. You carry it through a hall lined with tapestries depicting things like heroic battles and noblemen in tights pointing at the sky. You don't ask questions. You just serve the drinks, wine. So much wine. Red, white, spiced, mulled. Some are served warm, others lukewarm because no one really has ice. You see a knight swirl his goblet like he knows what he's doing, then promptly spill it down his front. No one notices. Nobles drink with flair, or at least, they try to. Every goblet is ornate, rimmed with metal, or carved from horn. You hand them out to people who haven't lifted a hammer in their lives but somehow look exhausted from a day of hawking and listening to lute music. You hear laughter erupt from the corner. One of the guests, flushed and sweating, is retelling a story about falling off his horse, except now the horse speaks Latin and was probably a demon. Someone else raises a goblet and declares eternal friendship with the table. They've just met. By the time the second course rolls in, half the people at the high table are already tipsy. One noblewoman has mistaken the gravy for soup and is sipping it with a spoon that's definitely not hers. Another has tied his napkin around his head like a bandana and insists he's invented a new style of chivalry. You, meanwhile, are still carrying trays. There's a ritual to noble drinking that's different from the village. More performative. Less about thirst, more about status. Every toast has a flourish. Every sip is observed. Drunkenness is permitted, but only if it's charming. If you're important enough, your slurred Latin is endearing. If you're not, it's just messy. Historians still argue whether nobles truly drank more than commoners, or if their intoxication was simply more visible, more documented, more loudly sung about in bad poems. Either way, you're watching it happen in real time, and it's magnificent. One of the knights drops his goblet. It rolls under the table, comes out the other side, and knocks into your boot. You pick it up, wipe it on your tunic, and return it before he notices. He thanks you with a piece of cheese. Eventually, music begins, lutes, flutes, maybe a harp or two. Someone sings a ballad about love, death, and probably geese. No one listens past the second verse, and soon the clapping begins. Slow, rhythmic, slightly offbeat, dancing follows. Not the frantic stomping of the village tavern, but a courtly sort of glide, filled with turns and bows. It would be elegant, if everyone weren't half-drunk and miscounting their steps. One poor squire takes an elbow to the ribs and crashes into a pastry display. You try not to laugh. You fail. At the far end of the hall, you catch a glimpse of the Lord himself, rosy-cheeked, loud, and currently holding 2 goblets. He's praising the vintage, claiming it's from Gascony, though you're pretty sure it came from a barrel labeled red number 3. Still, he's happy. That's what matters, and here's the thing, noble drunkenness is both spectacle and strategy. A well-timed toast can build alliances. A shared bottle can seal a deal. A feast can distract from a tax increase or a failed harvest. These aren't just parties, they're politics, swirled with honey and spice and served in gold-rimmed cups. You refill a goblet for a lady with a voice like a rusted bell and a laugh that could shatter windows. She pets your hand and calls you sweetling. You nod politely and back away before she tries to adopt you. Later, as the feast winds down and the guests begin the slow, weaving journey toward their chambers, or the stables, or the pond, you help clear the hall. The floor is a battlefield of bread crusts, fruit peels, and spilled wine. A lute lies abandoned under a table, one string broken, like a wounded bird. You find a half-full goblet on a bench and hesitate. Then you drink it. Because what's the worst that could happen? It's strong. Probably sweetened with honey. Possibly laced with something herbal. You feel a strange warmth in your chest. Your thoughts slow. Everything feels softer, like the whole room has been wrapped in wool. You sit for a moment on the edge of the dais, where the lords and ladies dined hours earlier. The torches burn low. The hall smells of wax and wine and roast meat. You think about how different, yet familiar, this all is compared to the tavern. Different cups. Different clothes. But the same laughter. The same slurred songs. The same wide-eyed feeling that anything could happen when the drink is just right. Eventually, the steward claps his hands and sends the staff away. You trudge down the long path back to your cottage, head full of music and the taste of old wine, and when you finally fall onto your cot, the stars still spinning overhead, you think, maybe tomorrow, you'll be invited back, maybe tomorrow, you'll be invited back, or maybe not. Because nobles, for all their indulgences, are notoriously unpredictable when it comes to favor. One day you're the helpful servant who delivered extra goose fat to the steward's table. The next, you're accused of stealing a spoon that you last saw in someone else's mouth. Drunken memories are short. Drunken grudges, oddly, can last for years. Still, it's hard to stay bitter when you remember the things you saw, like the moment when 2 visiting barons, clearly deep into their 6th or 7th cup, began a spirited debate about whether dragons had ever existed. One swore up and down he'd seen a winged beast in the Pyrenees. The other claimed he was a dragon in a past life. They almost dueled with ladles until a bored minstrel defused the moment by reciting a love poem about sausages. Or the noblewoman in the velvet gown who got so lost trying to find the garderobe that she wandered into the kitchen and tried to knight the bread oven. She dubbed it Sir Bake-A-Lot. You helped her back to her room and promised not to tell anyone. You told everyone, and then there's the poetry. Drunken noble poetry is a genre unto itself, earnest, overwrought, and occasionally rhyming thigh with apple pie. You remember standing near the dais as one puffy-cheeked viscount recited a 30-line ode to a duck he'd once loved and lost. It ended with tears. Someone clapped. You're still not sure if it was sincere. Historians still debate whether the aristocracy's endless wine-soaked revelry contributed to their eventual political decline. Too many goblets, not enough governance. But from where you're standing, clutching a sloshing tray of questionable cider, it seems like they're doing just fine. You've come to recognize the different types of drunk. There's the giggling squire, who tries to impress kitchen girls with exaggerated stories of boar hunting, usually involving at least 3 exaggerations and 1 false mustache. There's the quiet, red-nosed priest who always claims he's just tasting for communion purposes as he pours his 4th cup of mulled wine, and then there's the dangerous kind. The slurring knight whose merriment turns to menace the moment someone questions his lineage. You learn to steer clear of that one. You learn to spot the signs, the twitch of a hand near a dagger hilt, the tightening jaw, the sudden silence in a previously loud corner. Yes, even in stone halls lined with gold-threaded tapestries, drunkenness has an edge. It's not all songs and sausages. Sometimes, the wrong look leads to a challenge. Sometimes, a feast ends with blood on the floor, but most nights, it's just noise. Loud, clumsy, wine-soaked noise. And you, tired, buzzed, somehow still standing, get to witness it all. You've come to prefer the moments just after the feast ends. When the torches are dim, and the big doors are open to the night air. When the guests have either stumbled to their chambers or collapsed somewhere convenient. You walk slowly through the hall, collecting abandoned goblets, half-eaten pears, and a mysterious pair of silk gloves with no owner in sight. You tuck them into your pocket. Not to steal, just to return. Eventually. Maybe, and then, before you go, you take one last look at the long table. Covered in crumbs, stains, and the aftermath of an evening that tried to be elegant and ended with someone asleep in the soup, you nod to yourself. Another noble feast survived, just one more stop before home, the little barrel behind the kitchen. The one the cook insists is too bitter for serving. You know better. It's sharp, yes, but strong. A single sip is enough to melt the edge off the cold night. You raise the mug to your lips, smile, and think, tomorrow, the village tavern. Tonight, the Manor's mess. But in both places, the drink flows, and so do you. You know it's going to be a different kind of day when the first thing you smell isn't pig dung or last night's stew, it's honey. Thick, golden, floating on the air like a promise. That means you're close to the monastery, and that means someone's brewing mead, which is strange, because you're not here to get tipsy. You're here to deliver eggs. Or maybe firewood. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the scent of fermentation is wafting straight from the cloister garden, and your inner compass is already turning toward it like a moth to torchlight. You step into the stone courtyard, and there they are, the monks. Shaved heads. Long robes. Quiet murmurs in Latin. You'd think they'd be too holy for booze. But the truth is, these men of God are also masters of the mash. You walk past the chapel, the herb garden, the bee boxes. The bees don't care about your arrival. They're busy making the liquid gold that will soon be turned into something far more potent. And in a small annex behind the scriptorium, yes, the same place they illuminate those painfully detailed manuscripts with quills and gold leaf, you find it, the brewery. It's dim inside. Cool. Smells like yeast and barley and sweet decay. 2 monks are working in silence, one stirring a bubbling vat with a wooden paddle the size of a sword, the other bottling something into dark green flasks. They don't greet you. Just nod. Because brewing is sacred here, you weren't expecting this. You were taught to think of monks as solemn, chaste, quietly mumbling into Bibles. But here, they are brewers. Artisans. Experts. They know their hops and honey, their temperature ranges, and how to tell if a fermentation has gone off just by the scent. They pray, yes. But they also drink. Every day, the rules say moderation. But moderation is subjective when you live in a cold stone building and your only excitement is chanting the Psalms 6 times a day. You ask, very politely, if you might try the batch. They consider you. Then nod again. One of them pours a little into a wooden cup. It's amber, hazy, and smells like a summer meadow married a loaf of bread. You sip, it's glorious, sweet but sharp. Heavy with honey, but with a bite of spice and a little floral edge you can't name. This isn't just drink. This is the divine in liquid form, the monk smiles. He knows. You find out later that this particular recipe came from a manuscript copied in the 9th century. It's been made by the same order, in roughly the same way, for over 400 years. The secret? A tiny sprig of yarrow. And patience. Lots of patience. Historians still argue whether monks invented certain brewing techniques. Or just preserved older ones. But what's clear is that these holy men were, in many ways, the scientists of their age, experimenting, recording, improving. All in the name of health, sanctity, and a smoother finish. You follow one monk into the cellar, cool and dark, with stone walls slick with condensation. Row after row of barrels and bottles line the shelves. Labels in Latin. A faint scent of lavender and beeswax. Somewhere in the distance, a chant echoes through the walls like distant thunder. He shows you the sacred barrel, the one only the abbot drinks from. Mead aged in oak, sealed with wax, opened just once a year during the feast of St. Gall. You can't try it. You don't ask. Back upstairs, you sit with the brothers in the refectory for the noon meal. It's simple: bread, cheese, stew, and a tankard of ale. Monastic ale, brewed right here. Stronger than the village version. Smoother. It goes down easy, and you have to slow yourself before your spoon misses your mouth. One of the older monks leans in and mutters that the novice once fell asleep face first into his porridge after 2 mugs. They made him clean the whole dormitory floor with a rag as penance. He still hiccups whenever he hears the word barley. The meal ends with a prayer. Then silence. The monks return to their duties, and you, well. You linger, because here, in this peaceful, herb-scented corner of the world, you've discovered a truth rarely spoken aloud: the church runs on alcohol. Quietly. Efficiently. And with the best recipes in town. Sure, you'll hear sermons against drunkenness. Warnings about sloth and sin and losing yourself to temptation. But those are about other people. Peasants who fight in taverns. Nobles who duel in drunken pride. Not monks. Not this place, because here, the drink is part of the rhythm of life. Benedictine rules even allow for a daily portion of wine or ale, though the exact amount is vague. A hemina, they say. Roughly half a liter. Enough to warm the soul without dulling the senses. But no one's measuring too closely, especially not when the bee harvest is good and the mead is flowing. You spot a monk in the garden later that evening, pruning vines while softly humming a hymn. There's a flask tucked into his belt. Decorative. Probably gifted by a bishop. You wonder what's inside. You wonder if you'll ever get to taste it. You probably won't, but the memory of that one mug, the first sip of sacred mead, will stay with you long after the honey fades from your breath. You leave the monastery feeling lighter. Warmer. Not just from the drink, but from the rhythm of it all. The slow pace. The careful craft. The quiet joy of a life built around prayer, brewing, and bees. Back in the village, someone asks where you've been. You just smile and say, church. They nod, because everyone knows, the monks make the best ale. You sleep deeply that night, dreaming of golden meadows and sunlit goblets, and monks who wink before pouring just a little extra into your cup. Monks who wink before pouring just a little extra into your cup. You wake up with a headache that feels like someone's trying to play a drum solo on the inside of your skull. The roosters haven't even started screaming yet, but your brain is already punishing you for last night's choices. That last cup from Martha's Green Barrel? Maybe a mistake. Maybe also the reason you briefly thought the moon was winking at you on the way home. Still, you're up. Mostly. And it's market day, which, of course, means more drinking. You try to convince yourself you won't. That you're just going to trade a basket of eggs for some dried apples and maybe, browse the spice table. But then you remember, every market stall has a jug under the counter. Every traveling peddler brings a skin of something stronger than it needs to be. And no one, and we mean no one, sells pickled fish without offering a chaser. You shuffle into the square as the sun climbs higher. Tents flap lazily in the breeze. Tables creak under heaps of goods, fabrics, brass trinkets, sad-looking carrots, firewood, birds in cages. And all around you, flasks, bottles, jugs, horns, wineskins tied to hips like weapons. The first offer comes from a man selling sheep's wool and loud opinions. He's got a crooked grin and a cup of something cloudy. You take it. It smells like apples, vinegar, and regret. You drink it anyway. It's cidery. Sharp. A little sparkly. Your lips tingle, and now your day has begun. Market drinking is different from tavern drinking or monastic sipping. It's looser, faster, fueled by the energy of coins changing hands and gossip swirling like dust. It's halfway between barter and bribery. Drink this, and I'll tell you which merchant's cheating their scales. Have a cup, and I'll knock a few deniers off that scarf you clearly don't need but now definitely want. You're not even sure what some of these liquids are. There's something bright yellow and fizzy in a jug next to the blacksmith's daughter. She offers you a cup without a word. You drink it. It tastes like lemon, fire, and boiled nettles. You immediately hiccup. She smirks. Not far away, a traveling bard is offering tiny sips from tiny vials in exchange for listening to 3 verses of his epic about a noble who got lost in a privy and emerged a wiser man. You take the drink. You endure the poem. You're not sure it was worth it, but the liquid burns so thoroughly on the way down that you briefly forgot your own name. So. Balanced outcome. There's an open scholarly debate about how much of the average medieval person's life was spent mildly, or not so mildly, inebriated. Was it necessity? Culture? A strategy for coping with lice, taxes, and the general smell of pigs? Probably all 3. You'd weigh in, but your mouth is busy chewing on something you just bought from a man who promised it was wine bread. It tastes like raisins and ambition. You see Father Oscar wandering the square, robe tucked high to avoid the muck. He's pretending to frown disapprovingly, but his cheeks are flushed, and you notice his hand tighten protectively around a flask hidden in his sleeve. You nod. He nods. You both pretend it's water. You pass the brewer's cart. He's hawking his newest concoction, spiced birch ale, now with more bark. You don't ask. You just sip. It tastes like a forest made a bad decision. You thank him anyway. He beams. Nearby, a group of traveling Flemish traders are loudly arguing in their own language while drinking something from ceramic bottles shaped like ducks. One of them hands you one. You take a cautious sip. It's strong. Like really strong. Like, how is this legal, strong? You blink, and suddenly everyone's faces are funnier. You spend the next 20 minutes laughing at a basket of turnips. Eventually, you remember that you were supposed to buy something useful, like salt, or flour, or nails. You check your pouch. A single coin, damp for reasons you'd rather not explore. You barter it away for a half loaf of bread and a tiny jar of herbal restorative that smells suspiciously alcoholic. Market days are when rules blur. Nobles rub shoulders with peasants, sometimes literally, usually while arguing over cheese. Friars bless goods and then slip flasks into their sleeves. Children run wild, snatching bits of fruit and yelling songs with verses that shouldn't exist. And in the middle of it all, everyone is sipping something. You overhear stories. A traveler from the coast swears there's a town where the wine flows through wooden pipes, like water. A merchant from the north tells of a castle where they drink honey beer so strong it's banned from weddings. A tanner swears he once drank something that made him see his own future. He claims he didn't like it. You find yourself next to the pie seller, who is famous for making pastries stuffed with meat, herbs, and something that smells slightly like rum. She hands you one. You ask if the crust is soaked in spirits. She shrugs. Everything is, darling. Even you. She's not wrong. By late afternoon, the square is louder, warmer, blurrier. Two jugglers are throwing knives with concerning enthusiasm. A sheep has escaped and is being herded back by a boy waving a wineskin. Someone is singing the second verse of a song that definitely didn't have a first verse. You sit on a crate near the fountain. Bread in one hand, a ceramic cup of something purple in the other. It might be plum wine. Or spoiled cider. Or paint. But it's cold and mildly sweet, and right now, that's enough. You watch the clouds roll by. Someone yells about onions. Someone else dances. You think maybe you'll never move from this crate again. And honestly, that would be fine, because in the chaos of market day, surrounded by smells and shouts and accidental intoxication, you feel a rare kind of peace. A sense that this is the rhythm of medieval life. Not grand quests or royal decrees. Just people. Sharing drinks. Trading stories. Spilling cider on their shoes. You're offered a flask by a woman selling medicinal tonics. You hesitate. She insists it will clear your humors. You're not sure which humors she means, but your spleen has felt grumpy lately. You sip, it tastes like regret. And fennel, the sun begins to dip low. Tents come down. Carts roll away. The square empties slowly, as if the day itself is reluctant to end. You help the cheesemonger pack up. He thanks you with a wedge of something hard and spicy that you know will pair terribly with the winey sludge still coating your tongue. You eat it anyway. As you walk home, somehow heavier and lighter all at once, you think about how strange it is that nearly every gathering in your life involves drinking. Births. Deaths. Marriages. Sales. Sickness. Blessings. Even rainstorms. Especially rainstorms. The drink isn't just a drink. It's punctuation. It's connection, and yes, sometimes it's hallucinating a conversation with a goose, but that's a separate issue. You pass the miller's cottage on the way back. He's sitting outside, cup in hand, staring at the sky like it's telling him secrets. You wave. He waves. No words are needed. By the time you reach your own door, the last of the sun is bleeding over the hills. Your feet hurt. Your throat is dry. Your mind is foggy. But there's a warmth in your chest that isn't just from the drink. It's from being part of something. You open the door. Collapse into bed. The cheese is still in your pocket, and as sleep creeps in, you think, market day comes again next week, you'll be ready, you'll be ready. You wake up to sunlight knifing through your eyelids and the sensation that your mouth has been stuffed with hay. Not the soft, fragrant kind. The dry, scratchy kind that smells like goat. You sit up slowly, regretting every decision you made last night. Your brain feels like it's trying to escape through your temples, and your eyes refuse to focus on anything smaller than a loaf of bread. Which, come to think of it, you desperately need. You stagger outside in search of food, water, and forgiveness, because today, you've got work to do. Important work. You've been hired, temporarily, unpaid, probably illegally, as part of the tavern's cleanup crew, not because you're particularly helpful, but because, as the tavern keeper said while dragging you out from under the table this morning, you broke 2 mugs and kissed my goose. That earns you an hour of sweeping. You do not remember the goose, still, a deal is a deal, so you sweep. The tavern in the morning is a very different beast from the one you danced through last night. The tables are askew. The rushes are soaked. There's an overturned chair hanging from a ceiling beam and a suspicious puddle in the corner that seems to hiss slightly when disturbed, but the bones of it remain, and you realize something, broom in hand, this isn't just a place to drink. It's a place that functions. That has rhythm. That, somehow, keeps going. It's a machine fueled by ale and elbows. The tavern keeper, Magda, is already scrubbing tankards in the back room. She sees you and tosses a rag your way. You begin drying without complaint. This is her world. Magda has arms like tree trunks and a voice that could silence a riot. She knows every regular by name and debt. She can spot a fake coin by weight and a lie by the twitch of a nostril. She also brews her own house ale, brown, frothy, and known locally as liquid courage. You're still not sure whether the name is a warning or a promise. As you work, you start to notice the rituals, how the mugs are cleaned with a sprig of rosemary in the rinse water. How the floor rushes are replaced weekly, with the old ones burned for luck. How the best seats, near the fire, under the rafter that doesn't leak, are unofficially reserved for the oldest drinkers, the ones who've earned the warmth. It's a system. Chaotic, but sacred. Magda tells you a story as she kneads dough for the evening's bread. About the time a bard drank too much, tried to recite a spell instead of a ballad, and accidentally blessed the stew. It cured 3 head colds and 1 stubborn wart, she says proudly. You laugh, even though your head still feels like it's full of bees. She offers you a mug of weak beer, morning beer, she calls it. For people who need to apologize to their liver but still have chores. You drink. It helps. Tavern culture is strange. Flexible. At night, it's all firelight and laughter, loud voices and louder opinions. But during the day, it's quiet. Tender, almost. Like a beast sleeping off a feast. The workers move gently. The regulars nurse quiet cups and avoid eye contact. It feels like a shared understanding, we were all fools last night. Let us now be humble, and then someone new walks in, travelers, you can spot them instantly, cleaner boots, eyes darting at every beam and shadow. They ask for rooms, food, directions. And drink. Always drink. Magda offers them her lighter ale. Smiles tightly. Keeps one hand on the cleaver behind the counter. Not all travelers are trouble, but trouble often wears a traveler's cloak. Still, they pay well. Usually, you serve them without speaking, as Magda taught you. Watch their hands. Watch their eyes. One of them smells like cinnamon. Another hums a tune that sounds oddly like the one you dreamed last week. They drink. They soften. They tell stories. And this is the true power of the tavern, not just a place for getting wasted, but a crossroads of everything. News, gossip, trade, prophecy, flirtation, threats, poetry, dice, tears, arguments about whose ox is faster. The ale is the fuel, but the real engine is talk. You remember overhearing, just a week ago, a quiet conversation between 2 strangers about the king's taxes. One claimed to be a scribe. The other, a deserter. By the end of the night, they'd drawn a map on the back of a bread crust and sworn a blood oath to liberate the duchy. They were found snoring in the stables the next morning. The point stands, taverns are where ideas get drunk. You begin to see more of the behind-the-scenes work. The barrel rotation. The secret drawer under the bar where Magda keeps her best brandy. The way she slips extra herbs into the broth on cold days, claiming it keeps the humors in line. Historians still argue whether medieval taverns were dens of debauchery or vital community hubs. From where you're standing, elbow deep in dishwater, they're both. And that's what makes them work, because even in their wildest, rowdiest moments, these places matter. They're where travelers leave stories behind, and locals borrow courage in mug-shaped doses. Where loneliness is eased with loud voices and where people who barely know each other will, after 3 drinks, swear lifelong friendship, or rivalry. Someone asks you where you're from. You point vaguely east. They nod like that explains everything. Someone else teaches you a drinking chant. The chorus is mostly vowels. You sing along anyway, and slowly, your headache fades. Magda hands you a small cup of something clear. Barley spirit, she says. Sip. Don't inhale. You do as you're told, it's bracing. Like swallowing sunlight and bees, you thank her, she shrugs. You helped. And you didn't steal anything. That's more than I can say for half the clergy. You think she's joking, maybe. By the time evening comes, the tavern is awake again. Firelight flickers. Mugs clink. The regulars return, one by one, like birds finding their perch. You wipe the counter clean. You know who drinks what. Who wants their ale warm. Who adds mint to their cider. Who pretends to drink but pours it into a bucket under the table when no one's looking. This place has its rules. And you, somehow, are learning them. One day, Magda says, you might even work the bar properly. Not just cups and rags, but knowing what to pour, for the sad, something dark, heavy. For the hopeful, sweet cider. For the angry, bitter ale. For the lovesick, spiced mead, and someone to listen. Drink is medicine. Drink is memory. Drink is message. By now the tables are full, the air thick with laughter, and you realize that cleaning the tavern earned you more than a dry shirt and a sore wrist. It gave you a seat in the rhythm. You sit down. Someone slides you a mug. You raise it. You don't know what's inside. But it smells like fire and clove. You smile, you drink, and the night begins again, and the night begins again. You don't usually get invited to noble houses. You certainly don't get welcomed into them, unless you count that one time you delivered firewood to a steward with a limp and got paid with a piece of cold pork. But today is different. Today, you've been summoned, not by a lord. Not by a lady. But by a cook, a real one. Master Gervais, head of kitchens at Baron Harcourt's Manor, needs help moving barrels. And while you're not particularly strong, you are available. Also, you were promised a meal and maybe, just maybe, a taste of the good stuff, so you accept. You arrive at the manor just after noon. The sun catches on leaded windows and polished stone. Servants bustle like ants. Each one faster than the last. You try not to look too impressed. But then you smell it, roasted duck. Honey-glazed root vegetables. Warm bread with butter that actually smells like butter and not slightly sour regret. And underneath it all, something rich, dark, and boozy, wine. Real wine. You're led around to the side entrance, where the kitchen lives, half hidden, half glorious. Inside, it's heat and shouting and 10,000 smells. Spices you don't recognize. Onions. Blood. Lemon. Maybe lemon. Probably imported from somewhere far away and very expensive. Gervais waves at you with a ladle. You'll be shifting the barrels. You nod, already sweating. Turns out, these aren't just any barrels. These are the wine stores. And not the watery vinegar sold in your local tavern, either. This is imported Bordeaux, sharp Rhenish whites, even a few bottles of something Greek and ancient, sealed with red wax. You're careful. As careful as someone with jelly legs and hay mouth can be, because this stuff isn't just drink, it's status. In noble houses, wine is more than refreshment, it's performance. Symbol. Politics, even. What you serve, how it's poured, which cup is used, all of it speaks volumes. Serve a French nobleman a Spanish wine and he might take it as an insult. Use a chipped cup for a bishop and suddenly you're accused of heresy. You lug the barrels into the cellar, cool and damp and smelling faintly of stone and old plum. Gervais follows you down, carrying a lantern and a bottle. This, he says, wiping the neck, was bottled before you were born. Try not to drop it. You don't, he lets you sniff it, though. And for a moment, the world tilts, because this wine doesn't smell like any drink you've ever had. It smells like fruit and smoke and stories told in secret. It smells expensive. It smells quiet. Like a whisper from someone powerful. You don't get to taste it, not yet, but back upstairs, the preparation is in full swing. There's going to be a feast tonight. A proper one. Nobles in fur-lined cloaks. Visiting clergy. A minstrel's trio. Even a poet. They're serving 3 birds inside each other, pigeon inside chicken inside goose, and 5 different sauces, each more unnecessary than the last, and of course, there will be wine, not just served. Presented, because getting wasted at a noble's table isn't just about quantity. It's about theater. Ceremony. Everything's calculated, which wine with which course, who's allowed to toast, how many servants are required to refill a goblet. There's a designated cupbearer whose only job is to stand by the host's side and refill his drink without ever blinking. You watch them rehearse. Yes, rehearse. A servant practices pouring without spilling. Another practices announcing vintages without stumbling. The steward even times how long it takes to bring a fresh jug from the cellar to the table. Efficiency equals elegance, and yet, for all the ceremony, the goal remains the same. Everyone wants to leave just a bit tipsy, because among the nobility, drinking is both armor and key. It shields you from awkward silence, then opens the door to bold opinions. Political alliances have begun with shared goblets. Feuds have erupted after too many toasts. One story claims a duke once insulted a rival's wine so harshly that they scheduled a duel at dawn, and showed up still drunk. Historians still argue whether the wine insult was intentional. Or simply very honest. You're allowed to observe the feast, from the side door, just out of sight. Gervais hands you a small plate of roasted parsnips and the heel of a honeyed loaf. He also, miraculously, gives you half a cup of the common wine, which still tastes better than anything you've had in your life. You watch the nobles arrive. They glide into the hall like ships in a quiet harbor, all velvet and brocade and smugness. The host greets each one with a smile that never touches his eyes. Toasts begin before the first course is served. A bishop makes a joke about St. Martin's drinking habits. Everyone laughs too hard. The wine flows, red for game, white for fish, rose for something involving pomegranates. There's a separate cup for each. Goblets made of silver, gold, glass. One man drinks from a chalice so ornate it requires 2 hands. Another uses a horn carved with scenes of mythical beasts and drunken satyrs. You can tell who's important by how much they pretend not to enjoy the wine. The most powerful nobles sip daintily, raise an eyebrow, and murmur, "Ah, yes." Subtle oak. The lesser ones drink deeply, smack their lips, and declare, "It tastes like victory." Both are lying. The minstrels play between courses. The poet recites something about a woman's hair being like twisted grapevines kissed by Bacchus. Someone groans. Someone else applauds. By the 5th course, people are definitely feeling it, voices rise. Laughter gets louder. Someone slaps the poet on the back and calls him Vinehead. A minor baron tries to propose marriage to the goose. He's gently escorted outside. The steward keeps pace, refilling, replacing, managing the flow like a conductor at a very drunk orchestra. It's beautiful, in its own way. You glance at Gervais. He shrugs. The next morning begins with a thunk. A hard one. It's the sound of a jug being dropped outside your door, deliberately. You groan, peel one eye open, and curse gently at whoever invented wine. Turns out it was probably the Mesopotamians, but you'll be mad at them later. For now, you crawl to the door and open it. It's old Janice, the herbalist. She's holding a bundle of nettles and a lopsided grin. "Get dressed," she says. "It's brewing day." You blink. She doesn't wait for your reply. You dress quickly, scarf down a crust of bread that tastes like dust and disappointment, and follow her up the hill to the edge of the woods. The path twists through patches of stinging nettle, sage, wild thyme, and low, scrubby trees with leaves that smell like rain. Janice mutters as she walks. About ratios, temperatures, spirits that hide in the steam. "We're not making beer," she says. "We're making remedy." She means mead, honey wine, but not the sweet, luxurious mead you tasted at the noble feast. No, this is something older, wilder, alive, because today, you're not drinking what's on tap, you're learning how it's made. Janice's cottage leans against a hillside like it's trying to hide. It smells like dried lavender and damp wool. Inside, every surface is covered in jars, dried berries, herbs, powders, twigs, things that might be bones, and in the middle, the brewing pot. It's squat, soot black, and looks older than the concept of hygiene. She pats it fondly and lights the fire underneath. "Today," she says, "we brew for the midsummer festival. Needs to be strong. Needs to last. Needs to make the elders weep." You're not sure if she's joking. Step 1, the water. She hauls 2 buckets from the spring and pours them in. The sound is oddly soothing, like the beginning of a lullaby. Then the honey. Thick, golden, almost glowing in the light. She lets you stir it in slowly. "It takes forever, don't rush," she says. "The yeast won't like it." Ah yes. The yeast, the living ingredient. She shows you her starter, a jar of sludgy bubbles that smells like apples left out in the sun too long. It's alive. And moody. "Never name your yeast," she warns. "It gets attached." You nod solemnly. Next, the flavorings, dried crabapples, rose hips, a pinch of ginger, and something green that smells suspiciously minty. You ask what it is. She says, "Family secret." You do not ask again. The whole thing begins to simmer. The scent changes, first floral, then sharp, then warm. You're told to keep stirring. You do. Your arms ache. The room fills with steam. Janice hums a tune under her breath. You hum along. It's oddly hypnotic. You realize, this isn't just a recipe. It's a ritual. Historians still argue whether early medieval brewing was more science or sorcery. From where you're standing, soaked in honeyed mist and confusion, it's definitely both. While it cools, she lets you explore her shelves. You find a jar labeled dried laughter. It's empty. You ask if that's a joke. She raises one eyebrow. You return to your stirring. Eventually, the mix is ready for the barrel. It'll sit there for weeks, fermenting, fizzing, whispering. She lets you pour the first ladleful. It feels like pouring sunlight into darkness. "Now we wait," she says. "Drink?" You accept, but this isn't the new brew. This is last year's batch, aged and sharp and honeyed and a little like drinking melted candlelight. It's stunning. You sit on her step, sipping from clay cups, and stare out at the hills. Bees buzz lazily. Somewhere in the woods, a bird forgets its own song halfway through. Janice tells you stories about ancient brewers who sang to their fermenting barrels. About a monk who once tried to bless a batch and ended up accidentally inventing vinegar. About the year the bees all vanished, and the mead turned black as ink. We drank it anyway, she shrugs. Tasted like secrets. You ask why she brews. Not for money. Not for fame, she thinks for a long time, then says, because it's the only thing that makes the seasons behave. You nod, like that makes sense, and honestly, it kind of does, because mead isn't just a drink. It's a calendar. A memory. You brew in spring, drink in summer, regret in autumn, and dream again in winter. It marks your year. And your years, in turn, begin to taste like it. You thank her and promise to help again, she grunts. We'll see if you're still useful after drinking 2 cups. You laugh, but it turns out she's not wrong, because that mead hits slow, like sunlight soaking into your bones. And before you know it, you're lying in the grass outside her door. Watching clouds form arguments with each other, you nap. Briefly. Blissfully, when you wake, Janice is already back inside, muttering to her jars. You walk home with the taste of honey still clinging to your tongue, and something else, too, a warmth. A sense that you were part of something old. Something bubbling and magical and wild. Something that connects you to the bees, and the yeast, and the people who brewed long before there were words for what they were doing. You think about how every village has a Janice, someone with a barrel, a story, and a drink too strong for logic. You think about how many meads exist, light and floral, dark and spiced, infused with herbs, berries. Dreams. Some for weddings. Some for healing. Some for curses. One story says a village once brewed a batch to rid themselves of a ghost. It worked, but now the tavern sings by itself sometimes. You smile, because mead isn't clean. It's not civilized. It's not measured in goblets or ceremonies, it's messy. It fizzes out of jars and leaks down your wrist and ferments in your soul. You get home just before sunset. Your fingers are sticky. Your shoes are full of grass. Your mind is humming, you sleep like a rock, and you dream of bees that speak in rhyme. They tell you secrets, old ones, sticky ones, full of pollen and punchlines. They wear tiny hats. They hum lullabies about forgotten recipes. One of them hands you a spoon made of sunlight and tells you to stir clockwise, always clockwise, or else the drink turns into vinegar and regrets. You wake smiling, still a little sticky. Later that week, you're back in the village square, sipping from a cup filled with something you can't quite name. It's not ale. It's not wine. But it knows what it wants to be. You swirl it gently. It glows in the light, local honey, someone says beside you. Good year for blossoms. You nod, but you're not really listening, you're tasting, because now. After a day with Janice, you notice things you didn't before. How different honeys can shift a mead from cheerful to brooding. How the herbs change not just the flavor but the mood. How the brew itself seems to respond to the hands that made it. Some say mead is for lovers. Others say it's for poets. Janice says it's for anyone who's not in a rush. You believe her. That evening, the villagers gather in the fields. The midsummer festival begins. There's dancing, yes, and clumsy attempts at flute playing, and a contest to see who can leap over a burning bundle of herbs without setting their cloak on fire, but most of all, there's drinking, not to get blind. Not to forget, but to remember. The harvest. The sun. The old stories. One elder stands and raises a gnarled cup. To the bees, he says. Everyone echoes it, solemn and loud, to the bees. And to you, standing there with the warmth of homemade mead in your belly and a smear of honey still drying on your cuff, it feels important. Sacred, even, like the drink isn't just fermented honey, it's fermented history. You take another sip, and for a moment, you swear you hear a bee laugh. You take another sip, and for a moment, you swear you hear a bee laugh. Then someone calls your name from across the field. It's a child you barely know, waving wildly, clutching a wreath of wildflowers. Before you can react, they press it onto your head and declare you queen of the mead. Everyone cheers. Even the geese. You consider correcting them, but it feels wrong somehow. Besides, the wreath smells amazing, lavender, rosemary, and something else you can't quite place. Maybe time. Maybe mischief. Laughter ripples through the crowd. The music picks up again. Someone starts singing a very old song about a goat who fell in love with a beekeeper's daughter. You dance a little. Just enough to remember your knees exist. The night deepens. The mead does its work. You sit down beside the fire and let the stories pass through you like smoke, some true, some not, all important, and for the first time in what feels like months, you feel completely still, not bored. Not restless, just here, in the glow. In the warmth, with honey on your tongue and laughter in your bones. You never expect the monastery to smell like alcohol, and yet, as you step through its heavy wooden gates, the scent wafts to meet you, sharp, herbal, slightly yeasty. It clings to the stones and the sleeves of the monks. It's not unpleasant. Just unexpected, because today, you've come to learn how the faithful get tipsy, quietly, of course, reverently, but let's not kid ourselves. Monks drink. A lot. Your guide is Brother Alan, a pale man with a soft beard and softer voice. He greets you without much ceremony, just a nod, a smile, and a gesture to follow. His robes swish as he walks, and his sandals make no sound at all. If he weren't carrying a bundle of dried hops under one arm, you'd think he was floating. Today, he says, we brew. You were told monastic brewing was serious work. Holy work, even. A way to nourish the body while tending the soul. But as you step into the brewing hall, you realize it's more than that. It's an art. The room is tall, vaulted, and filled with the scent of malt and memory. Massive wooden vats line the walls, steaming slightly in the morning light. Copper stills gleam like church bells. Barrels are stacked with obsessive care, each marked with dates, names, and sometimes short prayers. May this not explode. For example, Brother Alan sets down his hops and begins explaining the day's process. First, the mash, barley and hot water. Stirred in great wooden tubs that look suspiciously like oversized baptismal fonts. The monks stir slowly, rhythmically, like a chant made with arms. You're handed a wooden paddle. You may stir, he says. You stir, the mixture is thick and warm. The smell rises immediately, earthy, toasty, comforting. It smells like winter mornings and distant feasts. You feel oddly calm. Like you've joined something older than religion itself. Brother Alan nods approvingly. You've done this before. You haven't, but you don't correct him. He shows you the hops next. Bitter, spicy little cones that smell like pine and tea and vague disapproval. These tame the sweetness, he explains. Without them, the beer would be cloying. Undisciplined. Like a sermon in drink form, they add the hops, boil the mixture, cool it, and finally transfer it to a fermenting vat. Yeast is added with all the gravity of a blessing. Alan murmurs a prayer under his breath as he pours it in. May this transform, he says, and be made new. You don't know if he's talking about the beer or himself, maybe both. Historians still argue whether monks brewed primarily for profit, sustenance, or spiritual enlightenment. But watching Brother Alan work, you suspect the answer is yes. To all of it, the monks, it turns out, brew not just one kind of beer, but many. There's the table beer, light and low in alcohol, meant for daily meals and hydration. There's the feast ale, stronger, darker, served only on holy days. And then there's the secret stash, the medicinal brew, only used when someone's ill. Or very sad. Or, according to Alan, when the abbot's cousin visits. He lets you taste a sip of the feast ale. It's rich, malty, almost smoky. You close your eyes as it spreads across your tongue, slow and warm, like candlelight in liquid form. It doesn't make you drunk. It makes you thoughtful. Balance, Alan says. A proper ale doesn't shout. It hums. Later, you're invited to the refectory for the noon meal. The monks eat in silence, but the silence isn't empty. It's full of chewing, spoon clinks, the rustle of robes. And somewhere, faintly, the sound of bees. You eat barley stew and thick bread. The beer they serve is mild, cloudy, golden. It tastes like effort. Like patience, like something earned. After lunch, Alan shows you the garden, where the herbs grow, because the monks don't just brew ale, they infuse it. Chamomile, sage, marjoram, yarrow, mugwort. Some for flavor. Some for healing. Some, he admits with a sideways glance, for remembering dreams. There's a theory, whispered among herbalists, that the monks once made a beer that could reveal your past lives. They stopped brewing it when one monk had a vision of himself as a dung beetle. He refused to drink anything stronger than water after that. You ask Alan if it's true, he smiles but says nothing. Back in the brewhouse, a barrel is tapped for tasting. The abbot joins you, an older man with eyebrows like moss and a laugh that could shake a bell tower. He raises a cup, to our labors, he says, and their surprises. You toast. The beer is different. Not bad. Just bold. Spiced with something unfamiliar. Nutmeg. Anise. A hint of citrus, cloves, Alan whispers. And a touch of ginger. It's surprisingly festive. You sip slowly. The abbot tells a story about a visiting bishop who got tipsy on feast ale and began preaching in song. The monks had to transcribe it phonetically. They still sing it in midsummer. The evening light begins to slant golden across the stones. You help seal a barrel. Alan teaches you to write the mark with a charcoal stick, a small cross, a number, and a symbol for finished. It feels like signing a prayer. As you leave, they hand you a flask, for the road, the abbot says. But not for the horse. You promise to use it wisely. They don't watch you go, monks are used to people passing through. But for a brief time, you were part of the cycle, grain to mash, yeast to spirit, word to silence. You feel it in your hands, still sticky with barley, and in your heart, somehow quieter than before. You stop halfway down the path and take a sip from the flask. It's cool. Gentle. Golden, and it hums. It's cool. Gentle. Golden, and it hums. You sit on a mossy wall just off the path, the monastery still visible in the golden distance. The flask rests in your lap, half full and warm from your hand. The sun is low now, casting everything in long shadows. You lean back against a tree and listen, not just to birdsong or distant bells, but to the gentle quiet that lingers after a day spent doing something meaningful. You think about the way the monks moved. Not quickly, but with purpose. Every stir of the mash, every prayer over the yeast, every fold of robe, slow, intentional. Like the brewing itself had taught them to exist differently. To rise with the sun. To wait. To trust bubbles and time and transformation. The beer was never rushed. And maybe, you think, neither were they. That's the gift, isn't it? Not just the taste or the warmth or the laugh shared over a cup, but the pace. A life brewed slowly. A life that ferments in peace. You take another sip, this one feels deeper. As if the brew is telling you something. Not with words, but with presence. A soft insistence to notice the moment. The trees. The bees. The sweat still drying on your collar from stirring barley. You breathe out, long and slow, and then, footsteps, gentle ones. Sandals. Brother Alan, he's carrying a second flask. For comparison, he says, and sits beside you without another word. Together, you sip the second brew. It's brighter. Lighter, citrus-laced. A spring beer, he says. Brewed 3 months ago when the trees were still blooming. You can taste the air, he adds, and he's right. This one tastes like open windows and wet soil and mornings that stretch too long. You trade flasks. Sip each again, one hums. One sings. He tells you that the monks once tried to age a beer for 5 years, an experiment in patience. When they finally opened it, it tasted like dust and old shoes. They drank it anyway. Failure is part of the recipe, he says. You nod. Because it's true. And not just for brewing, there's a lull. The air shifts. The monastery bell rings somewhere behind you, low and slow, calling the monks to evening prayers. Alan doesn't move. Instead, he says, I used to drink to forget. Before I came here. You look at him. He's still watching the horizon. I don't anymore, he adds. Now I drink to remember. You don't ask what, you just clink your flask gently against his. To memory, the sky deepens into lavender and blue. Stars blink to life above the tree line. Somewhere, an owl begins its rounds. Alan rises, dusts off his robe, and nods toward the monastery. We'll leave a light for you, he says, and then he's gone, swallowed by the path. You stay a little longer, sipping from both flasks now, letting the quiet wrap around you like a warm cloak. You think of the monks' patient hands, the soft hiss of fermenting barrels, the echo of laughter in the refectory, and you realize, in a world that rushes and shouts, there's something deeply rebellious about gentle brewing, something holy in the hush between sips. Eventually, you rise and walk home under the stars, flask tucked inside your coat, the soft hum of monastic ale still buzzing in your bones. And that night, your dreams are steady. Simple, they smell like barley, and they hum. 2. You awake to chickens, not just any chickens. Hungover chickens. The kind that peck irritably at last night's spilled grain, giving you judgmental side-eye like they remember everything you did after your 3rd cup of cider. You groan, sit up, and swat away a curious hen. Last night's memories come back slowly. A bonfire. A lute. Someone trying to juggle turnips. Possibly you. There was laughter, definitely. And dancing. And cider, sweet, golden, dangerously easy to drink. It had tasted like sunshine and apples and maybe a little like regret, but that was village cider. Today, you're headed to a farmstead out in the hills, where the real stuff is made. Not the bubbly brew handed out during harvest festivals. No, this is the strong, raw, often experimental drink crafted by people who've stared down a barrel of rotting fruit and said, yes. Let's see what happens. So you follow the winding dirt path through damp meadows and fruiting hedgerows, until the land swells up into orchards. Trees bow under the weight of ripe apples, red, green, yellow, freckled, striped. You can smell them before you even arrive. The air is thick with fermenting sweetness. The farmhouse looks like it's been there forever, half swallowed by ivy and flanked by barrels big enough to nap in. A weathered woman waves from the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. You're here for the squeeze? You nod, she grins. You'll need boots. Her name is Magda. She's the cider matron of the valley, part chemist, part artist, part therapist for troubled apples. No one really knows how old she is. Rumors say she was born during a thunderstorm and swaddled in apple peels. Others claim she once outdrank a Viking. Both feel true. She leads you behind the barn, where today's pressing is already underway. It's beautiful chaos, baskets of apples being dumped, sorted, crushed, and mushed by calloused hands and booted feet. There's juice everywhere. It smells incredible. Start with sorting, she says. Bruised, overripe, weirdly shaped. Those go in the strong batch. You get to work, picking through apples. It's oddly soothing. The fruit is warm from the sun, and each variety has a different smell. Some sharp and grassy. Others soft and floral. One tiny yellow one smells like pears and mischief. These make the cider dance, Magda says, popping one into her mouth. Once sorted, the apples are crushed. First with a giant wooden press that groans like it remembers every season. Then, with feet, yes. Feet, you stare, Magda shrugs. You want it rustic or not? You take off your boots, the apple mash is cold, wet and strangely satisfying. You squish and stomp, slipping now and then. Laughing with the others doing the same. There's something liberating about it. Like smashing rules into pulp, when the juice is collected, it's poured into barrels to ferment. Magda lets you choose which herbs to toss in, a pinch of cinnamon bark, maybe some wild fennel, or a sprig of rosemary for clarity, whatever that means. You go with ginger and thyme. She nods like you've passed a test. The barrels are sealed, labeled, and stored in a dark, cool cellar that smells like stories. She shows you others, batches from past years. Some marked with strange symbols, others with dates or cryptic phrases like Too Soon and Fox Tuesday. One is simply labeled Don't. You don't ask. Later, she gives you a tasting, 5 clay cups in a row. The first is golden, light, sparkling. Almost wine-like. You take a sip and it lifts off your tongue like a kite on a windy hill. Good for weddings, she says. The second is cloudy, with a sour bite. Funky, alive, full of character. You make a face, she grins. That's the one that wins contests. The third is sweet and spiced, like liquid pie. The fourth is deep amber, smoky, and quiet. It tastes like autumn and old friendships. The fifth is confusing, it smells like mushrooms and rain. It tastes like walnuts and forgotten promises. You're not sure if you like it. That's the one we make when no one's watching, she says, eyes twinkling. It's for thinking, not drinking. You sip again, and yeah. It makes you think, about time. About rot. About how fermentation is just decay that learned to be useful. Historians still argue whether cider was invented by accident or intention. Whether it was a desperate peasant trying to save bruised fruit, or a deliberate craft handed down from orchard gods, either way, it stuck, and not just because it tasted good. Cider was portable. Easy to make. Safer than most water. It traveled in skins and barrels, sloshed through harvest feasts, filled the bellies of soldiers and monks and midwives. It was medicine and celebration and gossip fuel. It still is. Magda tells you about the wassail, a winter ritual. The orchard is blessed with song and drink, to ensure a good harvest the following year. People dress as trees. They dance around the trunks. They pour cider at the roots, give a little back, she says. It keeps the trees loyal. You ask if it works, she doesn't answer. She just taps a tree and says, "This one remembers." As the sun begins to set, you help carry buckets and clean tools. She lets you bottle a small jug of the fresh batch, still cloudy, still warm, still full of wild yeast and potential. It'll change, she warns. Like everything good. You tuck it under your arm. Before you leave, she hands you one more cup. It's small, dark, fizzy, and completely unexpected. Black cider, she says. Secret recipe. Don't drink it alone. You ask what happens if you do, she shrugs. You might start talking to birds. You laugh, then drink. It tastes like treacle and stars and thunder. Like something too old to name. You look up, half expecting the sky to open. It doesn't, but the chickens back home do seem to understand you a little better that night. You fall asleep with your jug beside your bed, a head full of apples, and the soft fizz of fermentation whispering you toward dreams, dreams where orchards walk on their own, and trees pour cider for you, dreams where orchards walk on their own, and trees pour cider for you. You stir awake sometime after midnight, just barely. The fire in the hearth is down to embers, and the jug beside your bed gives off a faint, yeasty warmth. You swear you can still hear it, fizzing. Not loud. Just enough to let you know it's alive. Busy. Becoming. you don't drink more. Not yet. Instead, you sit up and press your fingers lightly to the clay. It's cool now, but the cider inside feels active. Like it's turning the memory of apples into something new, something strange. Maybe even something holy. Magda's words float back to you, it'll change. Not just the taste, but the way you see it. And maybe the way you see yourself. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and step outside. The air is crisp. Stars smattered across the sky like spilled salt. A breeze rustles the hedgerows. The trees in the distance are just shadows now, tall and patient. The orchard watches even while it sleeps, and suddenly, without meaning to, you find yourself whispering thanks, not a prayer, exactly, just a soft acknowledgement that something in this process, the mashing, the stomping, the sweetness, the sting, makes you feel part of it all, like maybe the act of fermenting fruit is a reminder that even bruised things can bloom into something beautiful. That the ripest apples often fall early. That a little wildness in the mix makes for better stories. You pour a sip from your jug into the grass, for the soil, for the roots, for the trees that remember, then you return inside, feet chilled, hands warm. You curl back into your blankets, cider close, and let the fizzing lull you. The cider doesn't ask for attention, it just continues becoming, so do you. The fair has come to town, you wake to the sound of shouting, jovial, chaotic, and far too loud for a morning that still feels like it belongs to owls and dreams. Someone's banging pots together. Someone else is already playing a bagpipe. A donkey brays, offended by all of it. You sit up and rub your eyes, because today isn't an ordinary market day, it's fair day, and that means drink, more than just drink, really. It means tents lined with barrels and kegs. Tables groaning with flagons and pitchers. Jugglers balancing mugs while upside down. Children running between legs, dodging sloshing ale. Mugs in every hand, cheer in every corner, the whole town becomes one giant, slightly sticky drinking hall under the sky. You dress quickly and head toward the square. Already it's packed. Stall holders shout over one another. Bakers hawk sweet pies and savory rolls. A blacksmith is offering discounts on horseshoes if you can hit the bell after 2 Alesh. A bard is trying to rhyme mead with deed and steed and, eventually, mildewed reed. Nobody's listening, you drift through the crowd like a warm draft, and there it is, the drink tent, or rather, tents. 3 of them, side by side, all offering different brews, local ale, traveling mead, and something just labeled fermented surprise. You're not quite brave enough for the last one, not yet. You start with the local ale, it's brown, bubbly, and deeply familiar, half hops, half nostalgia. It tastes like every fireside story you've ever overheard. Like the scent of hay at dusk. It's served in a wooden mug that leaks slightly. The ale trickles onto your hand and you lick it without shame. The woman pouring it winks at you. Second cup stronger, she warns. You nod like you can handle it. You can't. The second cup punches a little harder, spicier, richer, and more confident. You lean against a barrel and watch a pig race unfold nearby. It's chaotic. One pig refuses to move. Another one turns around entirely. A child is chasing a third pig with a ladle. You sip. You laugh. The sun climbs a little higher, and then you move to the meat tent. There's a group of musicians sitting in a lazy circle just beside it, playing something that sounds like a lullaby, having a very good day. The mead here is different than Janie's, more polished, bottled with corks and little stamped labels. But it still carries the same warmth, the same floral hush beneath the sweetness. You choose one flavored with rose and cardamom. It smells like perfume and tastes like poetry. The brewer is a lanky man with 6 earrings and a cloak stitched with bee patterns. This one, he says, is for falling in love or forgetting why you did. You buy a second cup, just in case. By now, the fair has hit full swing, dancers weave through the crowd. Someone juggles torches. A very small dog is wearing a crown and seems unaware of it. Everywhere you look, people are drinking. Sharing. Swapping mugs. No one really minds whose cup was whose. There's a man painting with cider. Literally. He dips his brush into spiced apple brew and flings it across canvas like it owes him money. You ask him what he's painting. Emotion, he says. You ask what kind. Mostly thirst. It's not good art. But you understand it. Historians still argue whether fairs were primarily about commerce, celebration, or controlled chaos. From where you're standing, between a stand selling pickled eels and a juggler balancing a stool on his face, it's clearly all three. The fermented surprise tent is calling, and so, against your better judgment, you go. It's dim inside. Smoky. There's a table made from a wagon wheel. 3 barrels. 1 woman. She doesn't speak, just lifts an eyebrow. You nod, she pours. The drink is purple. Possibly pulsing. You take the tiniest of sips. It's sour. Then sweet. Then sour again. It might be made of fruit. It might be made of regret. You blink, it winks back. You nod again, and she refills your cup. Outside, the world is brighter. Louder. Tilted slightly to the left, a dance breaks out in the square. Not organized, just bodies swaying, arms swinging, mugs raised. You're pulled into it. Someone spins you. You spill half your drink and laugh too hard. The cobbler's apprentice sings a love song to the tanner's mule. The mule looks flattered. An elderly woman throws her walking stick aside and begins a jig that draws thunderous applause. You offer her a sip of your drink. She accepts, then mutters something about dragons and knees and disappears. You lose track of time, and then, as the sun begins to soften, as shadows grow long and laughter slows to a murmur, you find yourself on a bench beside an old man with a lute. He's sipping from a cracked mug and humming. You sit quietly beside him. He doesn't look at you. Just says, fair days are like lightning in a barrel. Blink, and they're gone. You nod, he hands you his mug. One last sip, he says. This one's for remembering. You drink, it's sharp. Sweet. Faintly herbal. And somehow wistful. You sit together in silence, the music fading, the tents being folded, the barrels being rolled away. The drink has settled into your bones, not heavy, just settled. Like a warm stone in your pocket, you walk home slowly. Past the fields. Past the hedgerows. Past a trail of dropped meat pies and one very full-looking pig, you reach your door just as the stars begin blinking awake. You don't light a candle. You don't need to, because your chest still glows a little, with the laughter. The music. The strange purple drink that might have been fermented beetroot. And the taste of that last sip, sharp and soft at once, a fair in your veins, a dance in your memory, and a dream that hums, softly, like a lute left by the fire, that a fair in your veins, a dance in your memory, and a dream that hums, softly, like a lute left by the fire. You lie in bed that night, eyes half closed, face still flushed from dancing and drink. The room is quiet except for the distant creak of a cart being wheeled home, and somewhere, faintly, a group of revelers still singing under the stars, off-key but full of conviction. Your limbs feel heavy but happy, the kind of ache that means you live today fully. The fair dust still clings to your shoes. The smell of cardamom mead still hovers near your sleeve. You smile, remembering the old man's words, lightning in a barrel. He wasn't wrong, fair days don't last. The barrel's empty, the tents collapse, and the pigs, eventually, go back to being pigs. But something stays. A shimmer in the blood. A rhythm in your step. A laughter that echoes long after the music has stopped. You think of all the drinks you tasted today, the familiar ones. The strange ones. The one that winked. Each of them told a story, not just of the brewer, but of the people who came to sip and share, to talk and trade and tease and toast. It's easy to forget, sometimes, that drink in the medieval world wasn't just a beverage, it was a language, a form of communion, long before wine met wafer. A way to say, I see you. I trust you. Sit with me a while and let's let the world go soft around the edges. You roll onto your side and close your eyes. Outside, the last chorus fades into the night, and sleep takes you, not like a door slamming, but like a cup being gently emptied, until all that remains is warmth, sweetness, and the memory of something fermented, fleeting, and very, very good. You're not sure what wakes you. It could be the wind outside, gentle, insistent, rattling the shutters like a drunk trying to remember the rhythm to a song. Or it could be the smell of smoke from a nearby hearth. Or maybe it's just something in the air. Something still. Something heavy, because today feels different. It's not a feast day. Not a market day. There are no fairs, no visiting jesters, no traveling brewers hawking experimental meads with suspicious twinkles in their eyes. Today is the morning after the music. After the mugs. After the stories and jigs and slurred declarations of love to anyone within earshot, including, you vaguely recall, a goat. Today is the slow, quiet, slightly painful reminder that even in the Middle Ages, people got hangovers. You sit up, wincing. The room tilts. Your tongue feels like it's been carpeted. Your head thumps, not sharply, but dully, as if a monk is gently knocking at your skull with a wooden spoon. You groan, welcome to the recovery ritual. Despite the whispers of magic and mystery around medieval drinks, people back then knew what a hangover felt like. They just didn't have the modern terminology, or the pills. What they did have was creativity and desperation. You shuffle outside, squinting against the gray light. A neighbor spots you and chuckles, too many blessings from the barrel. You nod solemnly. She tosses you a sprig of something green. Chew on that. Mint and vinegar. Clears the fog. You don't question it. You chew. It tastes like punishment. But after a few moments, the dull pressure behind your eyes eases a little. The fog doesn't lift, exactly, but it thins enough for you to move, so you set out, slowly, on a walk through the village. You're not the only one recovering. There's a man face down in a wheelbarrow, snoring. A pig has claimed a cloak as a bed. A group of children are pretending to be drunk knights, wobbling dramatically and sword fighting with turnips. Their mother watches them with a tired smile and a very large mug of water. It's a village-wide hangover, and no one's in a hurry. You make your way toward the herb wife's cottage, the small thatched hut near the edge of the forest, where the air always smells like boiled something and the chickens have opinions. She opens the door before you knock. Saw you dancing, she says. Didn't think you'd last that long. You shrug. Words are still difficult. She waves you inside and hands you a bowl. It's warm. Earthy. Full of strange roots and floating herbs. It smells faintly of onion, fennel, and whatever emotion lives between regret and survival. You sip carefully. It works. Sort of. Mostly it distracts you from how bad you feel. Good, she says. Now go sweat. You frown. But she's already pointing to a small wooden shed behind her house. Smoke trickles from its roof, a sweat lodge, because here's the thing, medieval people didn't just tough out hangovers. They tried everything. Herbal teas. Strong broths. Cold water dips. Even saunas, especially among Norse and Eastern European communities. The idea was to purge. To steam the drink out. To sweat away the spirits. So you go in, it's hot. Immediately. The air is thick with steam and something sharp, juniper, maybe. Your clothes stick to your skin. You sit on a bench and breathe. Slowly, your head begins to quiet. Sweat pools at your collarbone, drips down your back, carries something out. Not just the cider and ale, but the weight, the fog, the sense that you've somehow been flattened and inflated at the same time. You think of yesterday, the laughter, the dancing, the way everyone shared everything, drink, stories, space. It wasn't just indulgence, it was connection, and that matters, because while historians still debate just how deeply social drinking was in the medieval world, was it a community rite? A survival tactic? A way to soften brutal days? The evidence seems to point to this. Drinking was how people belonged. To the tavern. To the feast. To each other. You leave the sweat lodge feeling emptied in the best way. Light, a little shaky, but clean. The herb wife hands you a piece of honeycomb on your way out. For your strength, she says. You bite into it. It's sticky and sharp and divine. You wander back toward the village square, where things are slowly stirring. Someone scrubbing ale from a cartwheel. Someone else is sweeping rose petals off the cobblestones. The lute player from last night sits cross-legged under a tree, plucking aimlessly, humming something you almost remember, and there, in the middle of the square, a barrel of water and tin mugs. A few people gather, sipping quietly. You join them. The water tastes cold and wonderful. Someone starts passing around a bowl of broth. Another offers a heel of bread. You sit on the ground, back against a wall warmed by the sun, and take it all in, the mess. The mending. The gentle, collective exhale. Someone sneezes, someone else groans and clutches their head, and everyone laughs, softly, kindly, because you've all been there, and in the middle of that shared, sleepy ache, you realize something. This too is part of the ritual, the coming down. The reckoning. The gentle realignment with gravity. There's dignity in the recovery. It means you lived. You head home sometime around noon. You nap. You drink more water. You nibble on bread dipped in oil and rosemary. You stare out the window at nothing in particular and feel okay doing just that. Not everything has to be a story. Sometimes, being part of the aftermath is the story. That night, you light a candle and sit with your journal. You write down the names of the drinks you remember. You draw a crooked sketch of the dancing mule. You try, unsuccessfully, to capture the taste of that one last sip, the one from the old man's cracked mug. You can't. But that's okay. Some things aren't meant to be remembered in detail, only in feeling. You close the journal. The candle flickers. Outside, the wind has calmed. A rooster crows at the wrong hour. Somewhere in the walls, you hear a bee, and even though your head still hums a little, you smile, because you made it through, and tomorrow, there will be something new, maybe something fizzy, maybe something strange, but tonight, there is only you, breathing, still, and just a little fermented, breathing, still, and just a little fermented, just by feeling, a shared warmth, a familiar hum, a long, slow exhale under a sky full of secrets. You wake to a quiet morning, no trumpets. No rowdy pigs. No juggling bakers or hungover saints. Just the soft shuffle of breeze through the eaves and the steady drip of last night's rain rolling off the edge of the thatched roof. You breathe in deep. The air is cool and damp and earthy, like wet leaves, wood smoke, and the faintest memory of cider. It smells like a fresh start. Today, you're headed to a tavern, not a noble hall, not a monastery's brewing cellars, not a farmstead with apple-scented secrets. Just a regular tavern, half crooked, wholly loved, and always full, because while nobles had their banquets and peasants their home brews, it was the taverns where drink lived loudest. Where ale spilled and stories spun and strangers became friends, or at least loud acquaintances for the evening. You walk through the waking village. Chickens peck at puddles. A child sings to herself while helping her grandmother sweep. A dog trails you, then decides against it. The tavern's door is open. It's still early, so the hearth isn't roaring yet, just glowing with coals. A sleepy-eyed apprentice wipes down mugs and hums under his breath. The floor is sticky, the benches uneven, the beams sag like they've had a long week. But there's something warm here. Something expectant. Like laughter waiting just around the corner, you find a spot near the hearth and wait. The tavern keeper emerges from the back, broad-shouldered. Apron stained, beard you could lose a squirrel in. He nods without speaking, disappears again, and returns with a small mug of something dark. You sip, it's surprising, not strong, but smoky. Bitter at the edges. It tastes like someone dropped a plum into a campfire and then tried to apologize with honey. You take another sip. You decide you like it. The tavern keeper grunts approvingly. Breakfast ale. Warms the bones, keeps the gossip polite. You raise your mug. It's too early to argue. As the sun lifts higher, the place fills. First, the regulars. The men with hands like bark and the women who talk like they're throwing jabs. They claim their seats with quiet authority. They drink slow, nodding more than speaking. Then, the mid-morning crowd, merchants, apprentices, people with errands and reasons and places to be. They drink faster. They talk louder. They glance at the door more often, always half leaving. And finally, the lingerers, the ones with nowhere to be but here, the ones who arrive with stories instead of tasks. They bring color, a woman with bangles stacked to her elbows and a scarf full of dice. A bard who doesn't sing unless you ask, and doesn't stop once you do. A man who claims to have been turned into a goose last summer and still walks funny. You don't ask for details, you just sip your ale and let the tide of conversation roll around you, because in a medieval tavern, everything is conversation. The price of barley. The shape of clouds. The questionable nature of that cheese wheel in the back corner. And always, someone's drinking story. You hear about a man who drank so much he tried to marry a scarecrow, about a brewer who swore his ale tasted better if you insulted it first, about a knight who never lost a duel unless he'd been drinking water. You're not sure what's true. No one is. That's not the point is that drink, in this world, was more than just something to pour, it was permission. To speak, to pause, to remember, to pretend. Historians still argue whether medieval taverns were hotbeds of sedition or just glorified social clubs. Whether they were the backbone of working-class culture or the slow rot of moral decline. From your bench beside the hearth, the truth seems simple: they were necessary. They gave people something the world rarely did, a space to just be, flawed. Loud. Tired. Hopeful. Half sober or not even trying, and the tavern absorbed it all. A man cries quietly into his cup at the far table. No one asks why. But someone eventually slides him another drink. A pair of sisters argue over who owes whom a pie. By the third ale, they're singing instead. The bard, inevitably, begins a tale. It starts with a rooster and ends with a runaway cart full of pears. You laugh before you even understand it. You order something else. The tavern keeper raises an eyebrow. You sure? You nod. He returns with a ceramic pitcher and a small warning. This one's from the coast. Fisher's brew. Stronger than it looks. You sip, and, oh, it tastes like the sea. Briny, bitter, and strangely invigorating. Like drinking a thunderstorm. You cough. Then grin. The tavern cheers. Someone pushes bread toward you. Someone else tells you about the time they accidentally pickled their own socks. Another tries to guess your star sign, then gives up and says, "You've got ale energy." Whatever that means, you sit. You sip. You stay, and the hours pass like stories being told. At one point, a priest walks in, the tavern hushes, then, slowly, the priest walks up to the counter and says, "Same as usual." Everyone exhales. The priest gets his mug and nods at you. "We all need spirits," he says, "some of us just call them saints." You toast him, he toasts back. Later, as the sun begins to tip and shadows stretch like sleepy cats across the floor. The tavern quiets. Not silent, just softer. The stories slow. The mugs empty slower. The bard leans back and plays, not for attention, but for air. You rest your head against the wall, mug warm in your hand, and let the rhythm of tavern life hum through you. You think about how many lives have passed through here. How many secrets soaked into the benches. How many first kisses and last chances and lifelong regrets were whispered across these sticky tabletops, and you realize, this is history, too, not the battles or kings or crumbling scrolls. But this, a warm room, a shared drink, a story that no one will write down but everyone will remember a little differently. The tavern keeper brings you one last mug, on the house. It's what we give the ones who stay past midday without picking a fight, he says. You drink it slowly. It tastes like home. You drink it slowly. It tastes like home. And that's everything. You wake slowly this morning. In that drowsy place between dreams and daylight, where everything feels hazy and gentle and almost still fermenting, there's no real rush to get up. You're not meeting a brewer or tracking down a lost goat or preparing for another ale-soaked village fair. Today has a different kind of promise. Something quieter. Simpler. Today, you're making your own drink, not buying, not borrowing, not bartering, brewing, and not as a monk in some vaulted abbey or a lord with a cellar full of barrels and servants. Just you. A person with a pot, a few strange-smelling bundles of herbs, a bucket of fruit you nearly dropped on the way home, and a stubborn desire to try something medieval. You shuffle to the kitchen. There's already sunlight on the floorboards, golden and lazy. You grab a handful of dried rosemary hanging from the rafters, a sack of shriveled but sweet apples, and a small jug of honey you've been saving for something important. This feels important. The medieval peasants' homebrew was rarely fancy. They didn't have precise thermometers or yeast cultures with Latin names. No bottling machines. No carbonation techniques involving pressurized tanks. They had instinct. Repetition. Smells, textures, tiny rituals passed down by grandmothers and gossip. So you start by smashing the apples. Not slicing, not peeling, just smashing. Into a wooden bowl, juice running over your fingers, chunks falling like little bruised memories. You add honey, sticky and golden. Then herbs. Then water. You stir. It smells like possibility. Or disaster. Hard to say. You cover it with a cloth and set it near the hearth, not too hot, not too cold. Just warm enough to invite the wild yeasts floating invisibly through the air to come in and say hello. That's one of the strangest, most beautiful things about medieval brewing, the wildness. They didn't add yeast, they trusted the world to give it to them, to land, to live, to grow. You sit by your bubbling concoction and listen to it breathe. It's faint at first, barely a fizz, but soon there's a soft bloop, then another. It's working. It's alive. Outside, the day unfolds quietly. A few chickens argue in the yard. A neighbor walks past with a sack of turnips and nods in approval when she sees your setup. Looks like a strong batch, she says, as if she can tell by smell alone. Maybe she can. You think about how strange this must seem to people now, making your own booze with nothing but time, fruit, herbs, and trust. But it's always been like this. In the medieval world, homebrewing wasn't a hobby. It was life. Water could be risky. Fermented drinks were safer. They stored better. They soothed the belly and the spirit. So everyone brewed, women especially. Aluives, they were called, respected, sometimes. Feared, often. They wore tall hats so people could see them in crowded markets. They hung broomsticks outside their doors to signal that drink was ready. Sound familiar? Historians still argue whether the modern image of the witch came, at least partly, from these brewing women, alone, knowledgeable, mysterious, surrounded by herbs and bubbling cauldrons. You eye your pot. It does look a little witchy. Later in the afternoon, a friend stops by. Magda, yes, her again, peers into the bubbling pot and nods slowly. Might be drinkable, she says, as if that's high praise. You sit outside together, chewing dried plums and watching bees circle your herb garden. She tells you about a recipe she once tried with mushrooms and birch bark. Turned my tongue blue, she says. Didn't hate it. You ask how to know when the brew is done, she shrugs. It tells you. When it stops hissing, starts sighing. When it smells less like trouble and more like secrets. You both laugh. Then fall into silence. It's a companionable one. That's something brewing teaches you too, how to sit still. How to wait. How to be okay with not knowing exactly what's happening inside the pot, but trusting that something is. Later, as dusk creeps in, you light a single candle and check your mixture again. It's thickened slightly. The scent has changed, richer now, less fruit, more something else. It smells older. More serious. Like it might tell you a secret if you promise not to tell anyone else. You taste a spoonful, it's odd, sour, sweet, herbal, warm. It tastes like yesterday's orchard and tomorrow's spell. You ladle it into a clay jug and leave it to settle overnight, because that's part of it too. Knowing when to stop stirring. In the old days, brewers used to talk about their drinks like living things. She's temperamental today. He needs more time. They're not ready to be bottled. They used pronouns. They gave their brews names. They sang to their vats. You don't have a name for yours yet, but you say thank you anyway, just in case. You sit by the fire with your journal open. You jot down your recipe, not exact measurements, just feelings. A handful of this. A whisper of that. You sketch the pot. The wooden spoon. The look on Magda's face when she tried a sip and said, could be worse. You smile, because you did it. You took apples and herbs and time and trust, and made something that wasn't there before. You made drink, you made story, you made memory, and now, as the candle burns low and the brew cools in its jug, you feel something old and human and very, very gentle stir inside you, a sense of pride, not loud. Not boastful, just quiet contentment. Like the fizz of fermenting fruit, like the hush of yeast turning sugar into something unexpected, like the knowledge that you are part of a line that stretches back further than you can count, hands crushing berries, stirring pots, watching for bubbles, sharing mugs, whispering recipes, singing thanks. You belong to that line now. Tomorrow, you'll share your drink, you'll pass the jug around, listen to the feedback, maybe pretend not to care when someone makes a face, but for tonight, the mug is yours. You pour a small cup and hold it up to the candlelight. It glows softly, golden, cloudy, with the tiniest fizz. You sip, you smile, you whisper, not bad. And the drink, if you listen closely, whispers back. That you sip, you smile, you whisper, not bad. And the drink, if you listen closely, whispers back. You sit there a while, warming your hands around the clay cup. It's strange, really, how something so simple, a handful of fruit, a splash of water, a bit of honey and trust, can feel so intimate. You brewed this with your own hands. Your breath, your waiting, your choices, and now, here it is. Not just a drink, but a version of you in liquid form. It doesn't taste perfect. Not like the meads you tried at the fair, or the finely aged Alesh poured from polished casks in noble halls. It's cloudy. A little uneven. There's a weird tang that might be from the rosemary. Or the fact that you forgot to stir it for an hour when Magda distracted you with gossip about someone's runaway sheep. But you like it, because it's yours, and in the medieval world, where most things were passed down, passed over, or passed around, you've made something new, something alive. You set the cup down and lean back in your chair. The candle flickers. The shadows on the wall stretch and yawn. Your body's tired in a soft, satisfying way, like you've planted something and know it'll grow. Your mind drifts to all the anonymous brewers of history. The Aluivs whose names never made it into scrolls or church records, but whose hands fed generations. The ones who stirred their vats while babies napped and geese hissed at the door. The ones who knew exactly how long to steep the yarrow, or when to skim the scum, or how to read a brew by smell alone. You wonder what they'd think of your batch. Maybe they'd laugh. Or nod quietly. Or pour you a mug of their own and say, yours needs more time, but it's got spirit. You smile at the thought. Somewhere down the road, the village bell rings once, low and slow. A signal that night has settled. That doors are closing. That the world is putting on its sleep cloak. You blow out the candle. The smoke curls like a ribbon, then disappears. You carry your cup to bed, sipping slowly. The drink is a little cooler now, a little gentler. It's mellowed. Relaxed into itself, you know the feeling. You sit by the window for a few minutes before crawling under the blanket. The moon is half full tonight, veiled behind a wandering cloud. There's a distant owl. A closer creak. The sort of silence that isn't empty, it's full of small, sleeping things. You think, just for a moment, about bottling more of your drink. Maybe naming it. Maybe giving it to neighbors. Maybe tweaking the recipe, but then again. Maybe not, maybe this one was just for you. A whispered experiment. A small, private joy. The world had so many big moments. Battles. Plagues. Kings and cathedrals, but in between, there were always these smaller ones, one person. One pot. One drink, shared or not. You slide beneath the blanket and close your eyes. The cup rests on your nightstand, the last sip waiting for morning, and you fall asleep with that soft, golden taste on your tongue, the taste of time, the taste of trust, the taste of something old and new and quietly, deeply human. The days pass, slow and sweet, no grand events. No roaring fairs. Just the gentle turning of life in a medieval village that knows how to settle into itself. You go about your chores, stacking firewood, trading dried beans for a wedge of cheese, mending a torn tunic with fingers still stained from crushed herbs and honey, but something in you has shifted, ever since that first homebrew, cloudy, sour, and completely yours. You've been looking at things differently. A little jar of pickled garlic makes you wonder about fermentation. The way the bread rises reminds you of the yeasts that live in your walls. And the scent of rosemary drying on the rafters. You don't just smell it now. You imagine what it might do to cider. Or plum wine. Or a vinegar tonic with a kick sharp enough to wake the dead. You've caught the bug, not the plague, not that kind of bug, the brewer's bug. It creeps in quiet, sticky, and slow. It stains your sleeves and sits behind your ears whispering, what if we tried adding nutmeg this time? And so, one morning, when the village is still yawning and the hens haven't even started bickering, you head to market, not to buy drink, but to buy ingredients. You carry your satchel like it's a quest. Into the dusty little square where merchants unpack their carts and gossip flows faster than coin. You're searching for ideas. Aromas. Accidents waiting to happen. A spice merchant shows you a tiny pouch of ground ginger. From the east, she whispers, though I suspect it's from the baker 2 stalls down. You buy it anyway. Another vendor has dried rose hips, and you wonder, what would happen if you paired that with wild honey and fennel? Then you find him, the mushroom man. He doesn't have a stall. Just a blanket and an assortment of fungi that range from appetizing to questionably sentient. He sees the gleam in your eye and grins. Looking for something to drink or something to dream? You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Same thing, some days. You pick 2 mushrooms that don't smell like wet wool or despair. He throws in a third for free. Use it carefully, he says. It's the one that sings. You don't ask what that means. Back home, you set everything out on the table. You boil water. You mash fruit. You make a mess. And you hum, a little, because it's comforting. This batch will be different, experimental. Risky. A love letter to the flavors you've been carrying in your imagination. It ferments faster than expected. Hot weather, Extra sugar. Maybe the mushrooms do sing, it fizzes aggressively, bubbles rising like a pot with opinions. The whole kitchen smells like a forest floor in spring. Punched in the face with ginger and something floral you think is the rose hips and not a mistake, you bottle it with reverence. You wait. You pray to the yeasts, and then, 1 week later, you pour your first mug, it glows amber in the sunlight, you sip, and your mouth lights up, it's tart. Spicy. Wild. Confused. A little dangerous. And absolutely unforgettable. You're not even halfway through the cup before someone knocks on your door. It's Magda. She doesn't wait to be invited in. Just walks in like a breeze with elbows. You've been brewing again, she says, nose twitching. You offer her a mug, she sips. She blinks. She stares at the ceiling for a moment like she's trying to remember what language she speaks. Then she mutters, "That's alarming." You beam, word spreads fast. Not because you told anyone. But because smells travel. And so do rumors, soon, people are knocking. Neighbors. Strangers. Curious monks. Someone who claims to be a fermentation consultant, though you strongly suspect he's just unemployed. You give out mugs. You take feedback, this tastes like lightning and cloves. It reminds me of my grandmother's attic. I saw God briefly halfway through. You start keeping notes. Scribbling recipes. Adjusting your ratios. Drawing smiley faces next to the brews that don't send people running. You're not running a tavern, not yet. But your cottage has become a place, a warm place. A funny place. A sometimes wobbly place, and in the medieval world, that's no small thing, because homemade drink wasn't just survival. It was hospitality. When someone arrived, friend, traveler, exhausted pilgrim, you offered them a drink. Even if it was weak. Even if it was sour. Even if it was just herbal water with dreams of becoming ale, to offer a drink was to say, you are welcome here. You can stay. Historians still debate how central homemade brewing was to the social glue of village life. Some say it was a background act, quiet. Essential, but uncelebrated. Others believe the brew pot was the hearth behind the hearth, the secret fire that kept a community warm. You're starting to believe the latter, because every mug you hand out is a little piece of connection, and with every person who smiles, or coughs, or hiccups, you feel a little more like a part of something larger. One night, you decide to host a small gathering, not a feast. Just a table, a few chairs, a warm pot of stew, and several bottles of your various creations, each labeled with curious names like Fog Spirit, Rosemary Reckoning, and oops, all berries. People come. People laugh. Someone brings a lute. Someone else brings pickled onions. Magda brings herself and says she's keeping the corner chair forever now. There's no plan. No script. Just a quiet night of mugs passed back and forth, of stories shared, of that low, golden glow that comes not from drink alone, but from drink shared. You sit back and watch, someone's giggling into their cup. Someone else is humming. A third person is staring at a beetle on the wall like it knows something important, and you feel it, that gentle thrum, that warmth that isn't just alcohol, it's something deeper. Something older. The hum of a house that's alive. A home made soft with laughter and bread and the burble of brew in the corner. You raise your own mug and take a sip of Fog Spirit. Still strange. Still bold. Still absolutely yours, and for a moment, in the quiet between songs, you think about how far you've come, from wide-eyed fairgoer to cautious tavern sitter. From curious taster to bold-handed brewer, you've drunk a lot of things on this journey, but the best thing you've drunk is your own courage, bottled in wild herbs, served with a side of laughter, and sipped among friends. You sleep in the next morning, not because you're hungover, though your tongue is a bit dry and your knees creak more than usual, but because you can. The gathering ran late. No one wanted to leave. The mugs kept refilling, the lute kept twanging, and someone, possibly you, insisted on reciting a toast to fermentation as a metaphor for the human condition. So yes. You sleep in, and when you rise, slowly, with the quiet joy of someone who hosted well and regrets nothing, you find yourself not with a headache, but a sense of fullness. Like something inside you has stretched into a new shape and decided to stay, you shuffle to the window. Outside, the world hasn't changed. The chickens are still arguing. The baker's apprentice still smells faintly of flour and shame. But you feel different. This isn't just a chapter ending, it's a closing loop. You didn't just taste medieval drink. You lived with it. You chased it through taverns and temples, fairs and fields, boiling pots and bubbling accidents. You learned not just the ingredients, but the invitation, to pause, to connect, to soften, and today, you decide, is the perfect day for one last journey, not far. Just to the neighboring village, you pack a small satchel with your latest batch, 2 bottles of candle sip, 1 of rosemary reckoning, and a final, unlabeled jar filled with a golden fizz so gentle it practically purrs. You've heard there's a celebration today. Not a feast. Just a quiet harvest blessing. Songs, prayers, maybe some bad dancing. You decide to go not as a guest, but as a sharer. Someone who brings drink, not for trade, but for togetherness. The walk is peaceful, the road is edged with leaves just beginning to brown. Crows argue in the trees. A breeze plays with your scarf and tries to open your bottle pouch. You hum a tune that might have come from the fair, or the tavern, or nowhere at all. When you arrive, the village is already in motion. Children carry baskets of apples. A woman strings dried flowers between fence posts. A man stirs something in a pot so fragrant it nearly knocks you backward with joy. You're greeted with smiles, some familiar, some curious. You find a corner table and set out your bottles. No sign. No fanfare. Just the quiet clink of mugs and the gentle pop of a cork. People begin to gather, not all at once. They drift in like moths to warmth. Some ask what you've made. Others don't, they just sip and sigh. One old man takes a gulp, smacks his lips, and says, "Tastes like a dream I had once. I was flying. And also, bees were involved." You thank him. A girl takes a sip of the golden fizz and giggles. "It tickles my ears," she says, clearly delighted. A monk tries rosemary reckoning and blinks twice. "Strong notes of confession," he says gravely. Then asks for more, and just like that, the circle grows. You watch the magic unfold. This drink, your drink, becomes a bridge. Between strangers. Between stories. Between breath and memory. It doesn't need to be the best, it just needs to be shared. Later, the songs begin, not polished choir stuff. Just loose melodies. Harvest songs. Rhymes you half remember from childhood. Someone plays a pipe. Someone else tries to harmonize and fails spectacularly. Everyone applauds anyway. You're drawn into the dance, not the center, just a quiet corner. Swaying. Smiling. Mug in hand, and the evening glows. The sun lowers itself behind the hills, painting the sky in soft apricot and smoke. Candles flicker on windowsills. Someone begins to hand out slices of honey cake, sticky and spiced and unfairly good. You sit on a bench, breathless in the best way. Magda finds you. How she always shows up at the right time, you'll never know. She doesn't say much. Just sits beside you, takes your mug, drinks the last sip, and says, "You've done well, brewer." You chuckle. "Am I a brewer now?" She shrugs. She shrugs. If it fizzes, and people smile, and you've only poisoned one person, yes. You pretend to look offended. She grins and offers you half her honey cake. You accept, and in that soft twilight hum, you realize, drink, in the medieval world, was never about the drink. not really, it was about gathering. About survival, yes, but also ritual. Celebration. Comfort. Curiosity. Resistance. Love. Each mug told a story, each story became a night, each night, a thread in a vast, weird, wonderful tapestry of being human together. Historians still argue whether communal drinking was a vice or a virtue. Whether it sparked revolution or dulled the senses. Whether it brought clarity or confusion. You suspect it did all of that. And more, because drinking, especially the medieval way, wasn't about escapism, it was about engagement, with others. With life. With the flavors and flaws that make up a real, textured world, and now, as the stars begin to blink awake above you, you feel part of that world, not just watching history. Inside it, you lean your head back, the stars flicker gently, the breeze smells of rosemary and laughter, someone starts a quiet chant to thank the barley gods. Someone else adds a verse about mushrooms. It gets weird. No one minds, you breathe in, you breathe out, you're not drunk. Not exactly, just steeped in story. In warmth. In the quiet fizz of being fully present. Tomorrow, you'll return home, you'll clean your mugs. Start another batch. Scribble a few more notes into your ever-messier journal, but tonight, you rest in the knowing that something ancient lives in you now, not just yeast. But wonder, and you promise yourself that when the days get hard, or the wind gets cruel, or the skies forget how to be kind, you'll remember this, the scent of herbs in steam, the sound of mugs clinking, the glow of candlelight on someone's face as they take that first curious sip and say, "Oh, that's different." The glow of candlelight on someone's face as they take that first curious sip and say, "Oh, that's different." You'll keep brewing, not just drink, but connection, and maybe, if you're lucky, someone will pass your drink to someone else, and they'll smile, and they won't know why, but they'll feel better, that will be enough, and now, the night is quiet again, the celebration has ended. The last candle has flickered out. The mugs are empty, save for a few lazy drops drying at the bottom. And outside your window, the wind moves gently through the trees, soft, slow, like breath. You lie in bed, blankets tucked close, the scent of spiced honey still lingering on your fingers. Your eyes are heavy. Your thoughts drift not like marching feet or roaring crowds, but like steam rising from a warm pot, weightless, content, and a little bit sweet. Somewhere, a song still echoes, low and wordless, just the hum of memory stitched into your ribs. You think of everything you've seen, the monks in their quiet cellars. The raucous taverns where laughter spilled like ale. The dusty fairs, the sticky tables, the mugs passed from hand to hand. The hours spent waiting for the first bubble, the careful sips of something strange and wonderful. The joy of offering it to someone else, and now here you are, at rest, steeped in all of it. You've traveled through a world that wasn't in a hurry. That believed in letting things sit and steep and become. You've listened to what brews have to say, even when they fizzed, even when they failed, and maybe tomorrow, you'll start something new, but not now. Now, your breath is slow. Your room is still. The warmth in your belly lingers like a whisper. You're safe, you're full, you're home, so let your eyes close. Let the quiet wrap around you. Let the soft hum of ancient stories guide you gently down into dreams. Good night, brewer, sleep deep.